Appreciate that, Arthi, and thank you for the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. So, I'm coming over from the East Coast by a company called Leaseweb. I'll be your host and moderator today. Today, we have an awesome discussion on building for enterprise cloud with cloud security in mind. Bare metal versus cloud. There's a lot of discussions in the industries as of 2018 talking about, are things moving away from the cloud onto on-prem? What makes that push really happen for digital transformation? So today we brought on an amazing guest speaker. We have the chief architect of Paymentwall and Terminal 3, Mr. Vladimir. Vladimir comes to us with over 20 plus years of experience in the industry, all the way from a software engineering role, all the way to his now lead cloud architect role. So Vladimir, wanted to give you some time to introduce yourself to the audience here and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for watching us today. So my name is Vladimir, and I work as a chief architect for Paymentwall. What we do is Paymentwall is a global payments provider. We also have some other sister companies. So Terminal 3 is a payments provider for game companies. And we have also another sister company, FasterPay, which is an e-wallet and for businesses and end users. So I started my journey from engineering into like lead engineer position to CTO, and now I act as a chief architect, working with the teams, defining the architecture of our products, and happy to answer the questions from Chris today.
Thank you for being here, and thank you to our audience members, and big shout out to Sprinto for hosting such an amazing webinar for us to be able to talk a little bit about the cloud industry and what's happening. There is a lot that's happening right now, Vladimir, as you can see, whether it's economically, whether it's from a company perspective, tech layoffs. Technical debt is on the rise, and a lot of savvy CTOs and architects need to start thinking a little bit more differently in this current environment. So, to start things off into the conversation, I kind of want to know, what are your thoughts on the current state of the economy, the current state of like the cloud, what are you seeing, as a chief architect?
Well, of course, I follow the news, and I see the effects on the of the economy on the business environment, like hiring freezes and like layoffs, and like being more cautious on the expense side of the things. And speaking about it, well, I think people also need to be more cost efficient and careful about the costs, about the investments into the products, the product development, investments into the infrastructure. And now with an ease of pay-as-you-go like services, it's easier to actually go and spend like over the budget. So like from like my side, I see that like the architects and people, whoever is managing the accounts, need to be careful on the cost, like on the cost spend, and set budgets for the products and monitor like what's going on the cost side. And also, like recently there was some news from Twitter where they were talking about the microservices. Elon was tweeting about this, that apparently I don't know if it's true or not, that some microservices, like no one knew like what they're doing and if they need them or not. So yeah, it's good to actually monitor what kind of workloads you have, what kind of services you have. You might have some dead, some legacy systems, if they're still being used, like if they're using the resources efficiently and so on.
100%. You mentioned it yourself too, especially with Elon. I think a Twitter employee actually came out just recently with that tweet saying, like, in regards to our infrastructure costs and migration cloud costs. What is our goal? Do we want to be in the cloud? Do we want to be our own DC? Do we want to be a mix of the two? And what I find funny about that statement from a Twitter employee, those are very valid questions, but sometimes the right questions really need to be tailored around the execution of what the business needs are. Where is that company at in their journey? What does the headcount look like? What does the current staff skill sets look like? There's so much that chief architects have to keep in mind when it comes to some of these questions. So I'm glad that you're staying up to date and you're seeing exactly what's happening in the market today, because yes, I mean, especially with evaluations coming down and the certain economical, worries out there, there is a definite need when it comes to how are you going to move forward and scale your architecture and infrastructure in mind with the resources and the companies that are out today. So we're going to get into some more questions regarding that. I want to ask you, I mean, you're coming from the fintech space. So
Right.
let's get a little bit granular from the fintech side of things. I mean, what is happening in the fintech industry that you see right now? I mean, I know there's a lot of buzz around cryptocurrencies and blockchain and all these different things regarding payments. I mean, we're seeing things with PayPal and all these different things happening. I mean, tell me what's happening in fintech specifically from your perspective.
Well, on one side, I would say that regulations are getting more mature. Well, of course, it depends on the countries. So more and more countries are coming up with payment regulations, licensing regulations for payment providers, and also with data protection regulations. So first, like European Union came, well, maybe not the first, but the major one was the European Union coming up with GDPR. Then there was the California Data Protection Act. Then like more places are following the steps, and this actually leads to certain requirements in terms of um, like engineering, security, and so on. So you need to meet certain criteria, in some cases pass certain audits in place to get the license or to follow the required practices and etc. So that's on one side of things, the regulations are getting stricter. Like on the other side of the things, you hear news now from like FTX and the domino effect that is affecting the industry on the crypto side, where also, I mean, there are some like the regulations are getting stricter, etc. Well, from this things being said, it's actually also put some requirements on the infrastructure in place because, like I say, from our experience, we one of the payment options that we provide in our portfolio is credit card processing. And for you to provide credit card processing, you need to be PCI compliant. And to be PCI compliant, you need to pass the audit. And this actually creates some requirements on your data center provider. The data center provider needs to be PCI compliant as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's actually dive into that. When it comes to like security in mind when you're building your architecture, when it comes to, whether it's an early stage or even as you continue to expand and grow, how important is security and having the right hosting provider in terms of making sure that they're compliant and have all these correct audits done correctly? Can you dive a little bit into, how important that security is especially in the fintech space?
Well, yeah, from my point of view, it's crucially important because you don't want to, have a security holes. You don't want the customer data to leak, be stolen, and so on, because there are certain fines associated with that, and it bears reputational risks, financial risks. Company might go bankrupt, or like nobody will trust the company yet if there are security breaches. So it's good to take security seriously from the start. Like if it's an early stage company, have someone who would be, well, if not completely in charge of the security, at least taking the role when you grow, like hire dedicated team or person, several people, hire a team in charge of security, and implement security into your development cycle, find the framework to um, follow security practices, implement them into teach developers the best practices from whatever standards like OWASP, NIST, etc. Have security reviews, do periodic vulnerability scanning of your system, take patch management seriously, um, pass audits if necessary, do penetration tests if you have some major updates in the infrastructure. Yeah. And when it takes to actually selecting the vendor for the hosting vendor, it's crucially important to check what kind of certifications they have on their site and what's covered on their site. Yeah, and when it comes to selecting what kind of service to use from them, like bare metal or cloud, etc. Also check what's covered by the security certifications that they have.
Very important indeed, and thank you for diving into that, because that leads me into some of my next questions for you. In terms of security, you've mentioned how important it is even from the beginning phases of a company to start with security in mind. And I think a lot of us, whether you're a small business or even mid-level enterprise, there's always a saying in the cybersecurity industry that security is always an afterthought. But you can prepare yourself with some of the things that you're talking about, especially when it comes to building from the very beginning, making sure that you find the right hosting providers, making sure that they're compliant in certain areas, making sure that you build the development cycles early on, making sure that you're hiring correctly early on. So my question to you is, what do chief architects need to be aware of when it comes to scaling from early to mid-level?
You need to understand what kind of workloads your product application might have. The technology choice might be also done based on. So you need to know the limitations of the technologies you're choosing. You need to understand if you have the right people to work with these technologies. Like not always something new, shiny out there that has a lot of buzz is the right tool for you to use. You need to understand where the possible bottlenecks could be. Like, I don't know, if you have a database, for example, to understand, okay, how we're going to scale it, what kind of load we have as a database, more like read intensive, write intensive, how to scale reads, writes, etc. So prepare for that. See the limitations of technology, pick some key metrics that you're going to measure and set the goals for those metrics. Okay, so we want to have this many transactions per second. As we see now with blockchain, is actually one of the bottlenecks that many companies trying to solve, and technologies are competing. How many transactions per second they can support to have the mass adoption and go to the next level. In terms of selecting the provider, actually in terms of selecting not the vendor and what kind of architecture to go with, meaning it's going to be private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud, or on-prem, bare metal servers. It's also good to understand how to support this infrastructure, how it's going to scale. So with bare metals, for example, you need to understand it's going to take some time for you to deploy more servers, set them up, etc. With cloud, things are a bit easier. With containers, maybe even more easier. And auto scaling might be more easier on that side. So keep those things in mind, and check your vendor as well. What are the SLAs? What is the uptime? the what is connection speed, etc.
There is so many gems that you just dropped there for a lot of chief architects there. I mean, one thing I really like that you said was just not to, fall whim to following some of the shiny tools and trends that kind of happen, especially in the DevOps and developer space. One thing that came into my mind was Kubernetes. Great orchestration tool, amazing, right? But as soon as it came out, everyone was trying to figure out how to implement Kubernetes into their stack. And, some people, indeed, it definitely propelled their workflows easier and how they manage their infrastructure. But then at which point there were times where people were trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. And then that's where the running joke is now, there are times where you might not need some of those toolings. So it really comes down to, what your goals are, what your KPIs are, like you mentioned, what things are you looking to optimize on, and finding the right tools and the right hosting providers that can help facilitate all of this and create a very flexible infrastructure. I guess my question to you is this, I mean, you mentioned a couple different things like, private cloud, public cloud. I mean, there's multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, on-prem, bare metals. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about, your thoughts, around the different types of products that hosting providers provide typically? Like, are you a cloud, all the way cloud kind of guy? Like, what are your thoughts on the cloud hype? How do you think of architecture when you're scaling?
Well, like over the years, as we've been operating, the industry changed. So more from like 20 years ago, it was more like bare metals or like VPS. Then Amazon came. Then more providers followed the suit. Then Kubernetes came out. So I think that I can say that I'm all into the cloud guys. So there are like certain workloads that work better in certain environments. So we actually use a hybrid cloud. So it's both like bare metal servers. We use virtual cloud. Well, we use public cloud. We to use Kubernetes, and it depends on the architecture of the product what fits better. So Kubernetes fits better, and if you have microservice based architecture, if you have something monolithic, I don't know, if you have big database workloads, you might as well use bare metal efficiently, but you need to understand that you might be not utilizing all the resources efficiently with bare metal, so that comes with the cost, and also like migrations, deploy new hardware, like new resources might be slower with bare metals. We have seen cases where you actually need to also just collocation and put some third-party infrastructures there, because there are certain requirements like regulatory or requirements from the partners. And in this case, what comes useful is a hybrid cloud approach, and like cross connects between the collocation and your like public cloud. So it all depends on your workloads, your product, how it's written, and you can choose, like, try to choose. Well, you can guess which infrastructure is better for you. You can play around with it in different setups and see what works better, faster for you, and also try to estimate the costs.
Yeah. I mean, I think, a lot of architects right now, they're thinking through, two different frameworks, one of which is, of course, cost. And the second of which is, how is this, setup going to make our engineers' lives easier and allow us to pump out either more features, focus on the things that we want to focus on, like business development, optimizations, all these different things. So, one thing I want to ask you, as a chief architect, you mentioned co-location, for instance. And co-location, I believe too, especially coming from the hosting industry, is great, right? I mean, like from a pricing perspective, there's a lot of great advantages. Capital expenditure wise, if you're not set up with the capital expenditure, it might not make the most sense to go with co-location, but if you have it, great, because you will save over time, just going with that model. But then it comes down to the management of it, right? So managing co-location, takes additional resources, manpower, and time, unless you have the staff, to do so. So, it really depends, like you mentioned, on where the company is at, what their employees' skill sets look like, what are they willing to manage, what they're willing not to manage. Would they rather click a couple buttons on the cloud, with a hyperscaler and just, spin up some instances? Are they willing to pay for that as they scale? All these different subtle nuances there. But it sounds like to me, with some of the gems that you're dropping, Vladimir, you're coming at things from a very practical approach, as well as almost like a cloud agnostic approach, right? So, I mean, can I ask you, like, what are your thoughts right now on the current state of hosting providers? I mean, you've gotten to work with many different hosting providers. You've worked with, of course, Leaseweb, you've worked with us, you've worked with plenty of other providers. Can you tell us what you're seeing in that current state of like the hosting environment industry?
Well, the couple of past years, I see that Kubernetes came out probably as an answer from Google to Amazon, how to make it more like technology agnostic, how to make your choice of cloud provider more like vendor agnostic. And I see a lot of cloud providers following the suit, adding managed Kubernetes services into their like suite of things that they offer, and it actually creates like brings benefit to people like me who need to select the cloud provider, because like if you know how to work with the Kubernetes, you have a wide choice of cloud providers, and then of course you need to look at the like how many zones they have, like uptime, SLAs, like some performance metrics. I mean, they might have different tools to work with this cloud, so you need to also see like if you're familiar, if it's easier to get to learn this, and so on. Well, I see some like cloud providers providing also the hybrid setup, so you can go with bare metals, which I think is great if you have workloads that work with this kind of setup. And then, like if you can combine both, it's actually even better. So you have some workloads for which you need bare metals, and then you have Kubernetes environment. So if you can combine them under the hood of the same provider, it's even more beneficial. Yeah, I mean, just a couple of observations from the industry.
Yeah. I mean, you are a chief architect for a powerhouse fintech company, Terminal 3 Paymentwall in the gaming space. So I have to ask this question. Like, you mentioned co-location being great for security. The title, of topic, is cloud versus bare metal, right? And bare metal could also mean on-prem co-location, right? But from Vladimir's thoughts, right, when it comes to putting tick for tack cloud versus bare metal. Obviously you mentioned security is a big reason why you went to colo, but if you had to choose a winner between cloud versus bare metal for you and your company that you guys are working on right now, where do you lean on right now in that? Do you lean towards the cloud side of things, or would you lean more towards bare metal? Is there a winner?
I cannot say there is a definite winner. So even for us, we actually use both, and I think there are pros and cons of using one or another. So, I mean, if you talk about security, so the pros are, for example, if you need to pass an audit, and this audit, like security audit, it might be easier to pass it with bare metal, because with cloud you have someone who is actually managing your hypervisor, and you need to prove to the auditors that okay, so I'm using the managed hypervisor, and they need to basically audit the practices used by the cloud provider like to manage it, you need to provide them with some reports. I don't know, SOC 2 or like if you're talking about PCI-DSS of this colo provider, and it needs to cover the managed hypervisor, and they need to see what there. Like if it's not there, they might require to visit the cloud provider. Like good luck with them getting access to the data center, or traveling there. It's extra cost for your audit. So from this perspective, it's might make things harder. From another perspective, like if you're using like collocation, or like if you're renting bare metals from the provider, you are responsible for security of those, like updating, patching the servers and so on. With cloud provider, it's actually easier. Like you have patches applied to the host, etc., regularly. So here there are pros and cons. With cloud, it might be easier to roll out like application and use infrastructure as a code to set up your project, roll it out. So makes things easier. When it comes to the regulatory, like security part, well, depends. The pros could be on the bare metal side, and well, it also depends on the workloads and the applications, as I said before. So for us, I mean, we have some workloads that require the bare metal. We feel it's like more comfortable to run it there than with cloud providers. So one example is with one of the cloud providers, we are considering the managed SQL servers there, and there was news for us that once upon a time, I don't know, like quarterly, there is a planned downtime of that service of certain number of minutes, which we cannot have. So we said, okay, so that's not the technology of choice for us because of this limitation.
Very nice. Well, I mean, you gave us the answer there. I mean, it sounds like to me in this battle of cloud versus bare metal that there is no winner. You know, for you, it's hybridizing your environment, and you know, if there is a winner with security and cost in mind, for you, you've kind of found a way to balance the best of both worlds. It seems like, Vladimir. So
Right.
kudos to you as a chief architect. I mean, you're doing great things. For those who are listening in on this call, you know, feel free to check out Vladimir, check out Paymentwall. You know, they're doing some amazing things as Goliaths in the fintech space for the gaming space as well. And my last question to you, Vladimir, you know, before we sign off here, you know, any best tips when planning to build architecture for a platform for aspiring architects, you know, aspiring CTOs, engineers, you know, just any piece of advice that you could give?
Uh, well, it's good to start with the technologies that your team is familiar with, so you have people to support it, and it's easier to hire for. So yeah, I mean, the choice of technologies might depend on the specifics of your project. Like, I don't know, don't shoot sparrows with a like big gun, for example. Well, there's a saying. Um, Keep security in mind, regardless of if it's fintech, etc. You don't want your like customer data to like leak. Like keep costs in mind also. I mean, plan how to scale it. So when you start writing it, try to understand. Okay, so how many customers I might have? Like, is it going to be like how it's going to be deployed? Like, understand the limitations of the technologies you are trying to use. Like, I don't know, they don't scale well traditionally. Maybe this is a better approach to take. Define metrics also to measure how well the system performs. I mean, implement monitoring in place when something goes wrong. So you have alerts, etc. People on shift. Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, all gems there, Vladimir. And thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Big shout out to Sprinto for allowing us to have this awesome conversation. I was your host, Chris Cheng, here from Leaseweb, and I'm signing off. And Vladimir, any final words for anybody?
Thank you, Chris, for asking these questions. Thank you, Sprinter, for having us today, and thanks everyone for listening.
Okay, I thank you so much, both Chris and Vladimir. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys about cloud versus bare metal. I do see we have two questions here, so we've been like running social media campaigns. There's like a couple of questions over here for us. The first one is, do you have any tools or best practice recommendations for CTOs when they're building enterprise? Oh wait, that's another one. Okay, yeah. Best practices to mitigate issues with visibility. I'm assuming this is with multi-cloud. Do you have any recommendations?
Vladimir?
Yeah, sorry. Best practices for
mitigating issues with visibility in the multi-cloud environment.
Visibility.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I get the question right.
Okay. I'll just
visibility of the you mean the logging and so on.
I am assuming. Hey, if you can you just like add on to it, or if not, if in the interest of time, what I'll do is I can just add Chris's and Vladimir's socials here. You guys can reach out to them in case you want to talk more about this.
Yeah, well, if I assume it right, so I would have centralized logging system, and I would have profiling logs of your applications. So you can trace where the request comes to your system, which calls are done in the middle, which systems take place, where it goes, and you have centralized, and you have unified, I don't know, requests ID. So then whenever it comes to debugging what's happening there, you can pull, okay, so this request, and then what happened, which parts of the system, and some metrics there, like time it took there, maybe resources that were spent for this, etc. So if I get the answer, the question right, that's probably the best practice I have seen.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for that. If that answers your question, just let us know via follow up, and I'll just link Vlad's and Chris's socials here so you guys can reach out to them. Check out Leaseweb, check out Paymentwall. There are some amazing companies that are doing some great things in the world of cloud, and if you want to know more about them, I'll just link their websites as well. With that, we end our third and final session of On Cloud 90, the CTO Masterclass. Thank you so much, guys, for being a part of this. I'd like to thank both Cobalt and Leaseweb for being exceptional partners here. And I hope you got your questions answered about what it's like to ace cloud security. And if you do want to know anything more about this, feel free to reach out to us. I'm just going to add all of our sites here, and I'm going to add some of our social links here so you guys can reach out and see how we can be of help to you. And that's about it. Have a great day. Take care, and I hope you walked away with plenty of insights. Thank you.